a bas-relief match to the Shroud of Turin, proving it to be a forgery created after 1355, discovered by artist Pgell, December 19, 2014. A video presentation in 3 parts, which will analyze digital images of the Shroud of Turin versus the sarcophagus of Pierre de Corneillan, to prove that the shroud image was created over the sarcophagus. Ever since it first appeared in the possession of French knight Geoffroy de Charnay in the late 1350s, the Shroud of Turin has fascinated Christians, art historians, and the public alike. Many have questioned, is it the real burial shroud of Jesus, or just a clever medieval forgery? In 1988, the shroud was radiometrically dated by 3 separate institutions: Oxford University, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. All 3 institutions concluded that it is a medieval forgery, created between 1260 and 1390. Despite this scientific confirmation, speculation still surrounds the shroud. How exactly was it formed? There still has been no agreement. Counter-scholarship has attempted to discredit the radiometric dating results. In 2005, French researcher Jacques Costanzo concluded that the shroud has 3D elements, and that it was probably formed over a shallow type of sculpture, known in the art world as a bas-relief. Around 2012, I happened to see a television program about the shroud that included Jacques Costanzo's theory. On December 19, 2014, I was doing research for a graphic novel I intend to write about the Italian Renaissance. I was reading a list of the Grand Masters of the Knights Hospitaller on Wikipedia. I clicked several links and read the biographical entries. Then I came to the entry for Pierre de Corneillan. Pierre de Corneillan was the 4th Grand Master of the Knights of Rhodes St. John from 1353 until his death in 1355. Footnote: the Knights Hospitaller became the Knights of Rhodes St. John, and still later they became the Knights of Malta. The Wikipedia entry had the following image of Pierre de Corneillan's sarcophagus. I was immediately struck by the hand position. It looked to me like the hand positioning on the Shroud of Turin. Since I'm a photo retoucher, I work with Adobe Photoshop image editing software on a daily basis. I decided to download an image of the Shroud of Turin and superimpose the shroud over the sarcophagus. Things immediately looked promising, especially the hands, but something was a bit off. Looking closer, I noticed that while the long beard of the sarcophagus clearly doesn't match the short beard of the impression on the shroud, there is a small chevron shape that does correspond. Approximate beard shape on the shroud, approximate beard shape on the sarcophagus. To my eye, the chevron impression on the shroud's beard looked to be the right size to fit inside the chevron shape on the sarcophagus, only it appeared to be mirrored. So I flipped the shroud over to look like this. I did not distort it in any way. It is only scaled. Next, I aligned the small beards. The hands no longer align, but much else does. I realized that the shroud was made in at least 2 steps. It was placed over the sarcophagus more than once. The arms and hands were made on one pass. The shroud was then flipped over, and the beard, face, and legs were made on another pass. I will now switch to Adobe Photoshop. By turning Photoshop layers on and off, you will be able to see how the points on the shroud correspond to the sarcophagus beneath it. Okay, we are in Adobe Photoshop now, and you are looking at an overhead view of the sarcophagus of Pierre de Corneillan. And as I had discussed, I'll be turning layers on and off like this. And let's proceed to point number 1, which is the date of 1355. This corresponds extremely well with the appearance of the shroud in the hands of a French knight in the late 1350s. So point number 1 is the date. Point number 2, beards match. Now, as I discussed in the slideshow, I flipped the shroud over and aligned the small chevron beards in this area right here. When I turn the shroud on and off, you should be able to see what I'm talking about here, how that small patch of darkness that represents Jesus' beard actually fits inside the sarcophagus beard on the bottom. So just turn the layer on and off a few times, and we're talking about this spot right here. And once I did align that, a lot of other things happened that are very exciting. So let's move on to point 3 and some of those other exciting points. Let's move on now to point number 3. Point number 3 is the stain around the head. Notice how perfectly it matches between the shroud and the sarcophagus. Let me turn the shroud layer on and off here, and you can imagine how this stain was caused by being draped over the sarcophagus head. Now I don't know what this stain is made out of, but nevertheless it fits here quite perfectly over top of the head of the sarcophagus. So that's point number 3, stain around the head. Okay, I have zoomed out now here for point number 4. Point number 4 is the circular stains on the sides. Now when the shroud layer is folded along these dark stains, this on this side and this dark stain on this side, the circular stains would also match up as this one did in the center. This will be even more apparent if I actually fold the shroud for you. I can't really do this easily in Photoshop, so I made a scale model which we will refer to a few times when needed. Let's go to the scale model now. Hello everyone, I'm Pgell, and this is the scale model I made of the sarcophagus of Pierre de Corneillan. We're going to be using this to demonstrate the folding of the Shroud of Turin over the sarcophagus. So let's get right to it. Okay, here we are at my scale model of the sarcophagus. I'm going to place a printout of the Shroud of Turin over my scale model and demonstrate how the circular stain at the left and right will correspond in the center at the head if we fold it over. There's one fold, and here is the other fold. And as we zoom in a little closer, you see that circular stain corresponds. Point number 5. Shroud head length corresponds to beard length of sarcophagus, and fold marks match. I'm speaking first of all about these lines that are below and above the head of Jesus. These are fold marks on the shroud, and they correspond right to the size of Jesus' head and the beard beneath on the sarcophagus. Now, I want you to also look at the overall size of Jesus' head in comparison to the beard. Don't look at the details of the face right now. Just look at the overall head size and how that matches up to the beard beneath it. Point number 6. Jesus' nose corresponds to line down the beard. Look at the nose line of Jesus' face and watch what happens when I turn the shroud layer on and off. You can see how it fits just to the left of this long line on the sarcophagus beard. This long line right here is what I'm speaking of. Look inside this red area that I have drawn, and notice how Jesus' nose corresponds to this area on the beard. Point number 7. Notch-shaped stain matches notch on sarcophagus. Notice how this dark stain at the bottom here fits right into the notch or depression on the sarcophagus beneath it. I will turn on the layer and turn it off a few times so you can see how they match up. Point number 8. Pillow edges match shroud fold marks. Look at these areas on the left and right that I have circled in red. Watch what happens when I turn the layers of the shroud on and off. These marks fall exactly at the sides of the pillows. Later we will see how these folds also fit into the folds of the cloak on the sarcophagus as well. For now, just notice that these fold lines match the sides of the pillows. I'll turn the layer on and off, and you can see how those folds fall exactly at the sides of the pillows. Point number 9. Tassel-shaped stain on shroud matches tassel on sarcophagus. Once again, turning this layer on and off, notice that we have the tassels of the sarcophagus right in these spots. Now, these marks are so perfectly mirrored at the left and right that I suspect that they were formed when the shroud was folded over down the middle. And they occurred when it was tucked in and stained down the right side over here. Either way, we have tassel-shaped stains right at these spots. Point number 10. When I first aligned the beards on December 19, 2014, this was one of the first points that I saw that really made me say wow and convinced me. Watch what is underneath Jesus' legs when I turn the shroud layer off. Notice we have a dark leg, a light spot in between, and another dark leg here. Okay, turning the layer on and off, you can see very clearly that it corresponds to the folds on the sarcophagus beneath it. We even have this deep groove down the center that is on the sarcophagus that would match up to the light spot that is on the shroud. I will turn this layer on and off so that you can see very clearly that the legs of Jesus on the shroud are actually coming from the folded cloak on the sarcophagus. Point number 11. Widening of thigh on shroud matches inverted raised area on sarcophagus. Notice how Jesus' thigh gets wider here. Turning on and off the layer now, you can see how it corresponds to this raised area on the sarcophagus. You will also see a stain here, which will be our very important point number 12. For now, just notice how we have this raised area on the sarcophagus and how it corresponds to the widening of Jesus' thigh. Point number 12. Circular stain on sarcophagus matches circular stains on shroud if they are folded. This was a very exciting point for me to find, and one of the more important ones in the whole presentation. If you look inside where this purple arrow is pointing, there is a circular stain on the actual sarcophagus. And now if you'll look to the left side on the shroud, you see a same circular stain, and on the far right you'll see a same circular stain. Now if the shroud was folded in a proper manner, all these stains would align. And I will shortly go out to my model to show you just how that folding would happen. For right now, I'm zooming in to show you the appearance of the stains and how close they are, and notice how they're all at the same latitude, I guess we could call it. There is stains, and if I move this one element here and turn the layer on and off, you should be able to see how this stain also matches what is on the sarcophagus. And now out to my model we go.